Hey everyone, I'm back again with Gabe, aka Fuhat, and today we're going to talk about military contractors. So, Gabe, why don't you fill us in of what's the latest happening in this space and how that's relevant for investors who might want to look into certain military related companies?
Yeah, definitely. With the political turmoil that you see in the White House, with the House Speaker actually being thrown out the first time
Mhm.
in history.
Yeah, that was pretty incredible that that happened.
Yeah. With that being said, with the new budget coming out through the DoD I forget what the actual name, but that budget just came out.
The Department of
And
Defense.
yes, thank you.
Mhm.
That was I just know the government has a lot of names,
Yep.
and with all that coming out through the new figures that they have, I think it would be a very interesting time to look into this because fun fact, if you invested $3,000 into Lockheed Martin in 2012, you investment turned into 20K.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah,
So
but with
So
no,
yeah,
you
what
can go.
what happened with that budget? So the DoD just came out with a new budget, and what is entailed in some of that?
The new budget entails that they're looking one to modernize the military and to combat China. You can
Hmm.
in the meeting in the minute slash the report you can see it, and in that meeting you can see the increase in space, not as much as the other segments, be through the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines, and the percentage in animal gets more of a boost than the space. But long term, I think war will go more towards the space
Oh.
aspect of it.
Hmm.
Because I was debating this in like 2018 through the Model UN conference. We had a whole entire Chicago conference based on the military actions of space and the implications of space for
Yeah,
military.
yeah, and it seems like there's been a lot of advancements with that. Like, I mean, even just thinking about some of the more commercial endeavors, like with SpaceX and Virgin Galactic, all those. So I can only imagine that our military is trying to do even more. And I remember India beat out Russia and landing on the South Pole of the moon, right? Didn't that happen
Yeah,
this year? So,
yeah. I think they landed either on the south side or the dark side of the moon.
oh, okay, yeah.
Even Boeing
So
saying it about.
say what?
So like the dark side of the moon,
Hmm.
I don't know if India landed on there, but you can't see anything on the dark side of the moon.
Ah, well, I guess we'll take their word for it because the news seemed to report on that happening. So it does seem like there's a little bit more of that space race happening, like as a general direction that we want to go in. And with things like remember the Chinese balloon that was kind of like floating around and it got shot down.
Yes, yeah, the Chinese level spy balloon.
Yeah. So it's like it seems like everything kind of happening in the air is kind of a big deal. And I'm sure also the Navy with the geopolitical risks with Taiwan and the South China Sea. And I think the Philippines removed some kind of barrier or something that China put into the sea. So like there's all kinds of little things going on that the US needs to kind of let's say protect our interests over in the more Asian waters. So I'm thinking like, it makes sense that more of the budget is going toward the space and also the Navy and Marines.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, definitely. With that too, you're getting more interest into space, of course. With the main company leading in space would be Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Lockheed Martin too.
Okay.
With all of them being the three biggest at the moment. With Raytheon right now taking a massive hit because they had to rebrand too,
Hmm.
and it is trading at extremely cheap. It's tanked, so it's looking like a very enticing opportunity.
But
But
why
with
is that?
though in the space, they're in the space, they're in the rocket space through the missiles. They're also in the they're also in the other aspects of the military too. Raytheon's such a big company; they kind of have everything seeped within the military. Given the fact that they're one of the main contractors we use for all this stuff because of
Mhm.
well, I don't know if you have viewed premium viewers, but the way that the military works is they put out contracts, and you can find this view through you can find it online. It's public information what they pull out. If you have you ever seen the movie War Dogs with Jonah Hill?
No, not yet.
That is essentially what the military complex is so essentially the part of the movie is they have two guys and then they end up finding this website for all the military contractors. Then you start to fill in small orders, and at the end of the movie they have to figure out how to get rid of all these Soviet missiles and then all of that. And then of course that is somewhat what the military does in a
Yeah,
sense.
right. And I know, like, I mean, I'm sure they put out requests for proposals, right? So a lot of these companies fill in RFPs so that they hopefully get the military contract, right?
Yes, yeah, yes. It's the RFP is essentially it does become a bidding war,
Hmm.
essentially.
Yeah.
But what some of these senators can push for other companies to come in and do other things because I remember there was a company making the new Humvee and
Hmm.
they're almost done with it, and then the government switched, and then all the progress they had just got scrapped because it was a whole new company.
Oh no, that's too bad. Wow.
According to
Can't believe
contract.
that. Wow, that would be unfortunate if that was like your only business and then like the contract got pulled. But I think stuff like that in the government kind of happens a lot. Like I used to work with some governmental related endeavors, and sometimes like when things are grant related or grant budgeted, it's only for a limited amount of time, and you have to try to accomplish the scope that you applied for the contract for in a certain amount of time. And you do the best you can, but sometimes the government renews more budget for it, or they it expires and it gets reallocated to something else. So it's like kind of tricky. So I can imagine that it might be sometimes a little difficult for some of these companies. But why do you think Raytheon got kind of hammered? Like why their stock might be perhaps enticing?
The management has been floundering for a bit. Give me one second. I want to see if they have it. I think Raytheon might have bought a new company too, so they might be getting punished for the acquisition they made.
Oh, because yeah, usually if you make an acquisition, like sometimes when a company is buying another company in a merger and acquisition, the buying company might go down kind of in value because they might be paying too much to acquire another company. So it could be using up either a lot of stock and or cash. And if the public thinks that they paid too high of a price, that might knock down the stock price of the buying company.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Raytheon didn't make the acquisition. It was actually L3Harris that made the acquisition. They
Hmm.
bought out Elgin Rocketdyne, which makes the rockets for the Ukraine war at the moment.
Hmm. Okay.
So it seems like it seems like management is the issue, and they're running into the size problem too. I
Okay.
think they're gonna punish V through that too. It seems.
Hmm. I see. So, you mean, are they like kind of a conglomerate of military type divisions? Like they have a lot of different kinds of products they provide?
Yes, yeah, they do provide a lot of the aerospace weapons and a lot of the other weapons too, through the Air Force and military.
Hmm.
Being
Okay.
this was being like one of the prime things for that
Hmm.
with the
Okay.
precision ammunitions, which has
Oh,
gotten a boost in the defense budget in Pacific.
I see. And speaking of missiles, do they have anything to do with hypersonic missiles, or are other companies working on that? Because I heard from the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. is kind of behind on some of that hypersonic missile technology compared to other countries like China or Russia, maybe.
Yeah, they do some of that too, but the main hypersonic missiles that we use via through the nuclear triad is made by Lockheed Martin,
Okay.
and they've been doing fine-ish, but with the modernization of the military finally coming into play, I think Lockheed Martin will win a lot of the contracts back via through the hypersonic missiles.
Wow.
And of course, Lockheed Martin does do a lot of the air defense too. The I know that Lockheed Martin did the air defense system for Mexico too.
Okay. So it sounds like they're pretty prominent as far as like some of the military companies, but like where should people kind of start looking into some of these potential defense contractors if they're interested? I know before we started recording, you mentioned that there were a number of military contractors. What were some of the other ones called?
Yeah, you have Northrop Grumman, which is actually run by women, which is very
Oh,
shocking to think about.
cool.
You have L3Harris, which just made the acquisition on Aerogen Rocketdyne, and then you have Raytheon, of course.
Okay, so we got Lockheed Martin, L3Harris, right? You mentioned.
Yeah,
Uh,
yep. Uh,
um,
you have Boeing too. Boeing makes the airplanes, and they do government contracts too. And then you have Huntington Ingalls Industries too. But
oh,
other than that, that's kind of the main contractors that the U.S. always picks.
and how about Booz Allen Hamilton?
Booz Allen Hamilton is one too, but it's a lesser known company, but they do work, they specifically work with the government because 99% of the revenue comes through the government, and
Hmm.
they work more or less through the technology side of things. So
Okay.
think like AI and all that too. I know that Booz and Hamilton too got a contract from NASA too. And I know that Northrop Grumman too works with NASA, I think too.
Hmm. All right, cool. Well, I mean, so how would you recommend people kind of start learning about this space? Like, do they start with like something they are passionate about, like if someone's really into space, or how would someone who's never invested in military contractors kind of like where should they start going to learn about more on these kinds of companies and opportunities here?
You can always go to the DoD report. It's really boring, but it will literally just start everything they're doing. I know that the DoD is trying to upgrade some of the last military ships to make them more modernized, really through the Ohio. I know they're making it into a new program. How I got into this space was I watched War Dogs from Jonah Hill, and then of course there's a
Nice.
Nick Cage movie out there too. I forget what it's called, but you can always watch that too. You can just pay attention to the news. A lot of these contractors do get a lot of bad press, given the business they're in. It's a very dirty industry.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because I mean it's sort of it can make people ethically feel a little bit divided, right? Like, even though some of it's important for national security, but sometimes some of the equipment might be used to hurt people. And there's also other, controversial subjects related to this. Like, are we giving too much aid to Ukraine? Or, I know that's coming up in Congress as a debatable topic of, for how long will America continue giving aid to Ukraine? And like I think I saw in the Wall Street Journal something of how some of the funding might run out at some point. Like there might not be that much more left to give. So in terms of like, military aid to Ukraine's purposes, like of, supplying stuff. So it kind of makes me wonder, like, you have to kind of weigh some of those factors and see, how that sits with you because everybody might have different values of how how they would like to invest their money because something I learned from another podcast, like from the Invested podcast, is every time we invest, we are voting with our money. So if you put $1 in a company, that's saying that you vote for that company and you believe in them. So you have to also, look into what are they doing, what are they focusing on, and if you are okay with that kind of purpose that some companies have, because might not be for everyone, right?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah, definitely, yeah. It definitely some of it does come into the morality of these companies too. And I know for you, I don't know if you have international viewers, but for like international views too, another military contractors out there will be BAE Systems.
Mm-hmm.
They make all of the inner systems for these machines, of course.
Oh,
But but if I was gonna pick one to like look into as like a very basic beginner, you can always look into Boeing. They have a commercial side, which is the public facing company. Boeing makes all the Airbuses, all the airplanes too.
I thought Boeing makes something. I thought Airbus was the European one.
Um, I know Boeing. I don't know if it's Airbus. I know that Boeing makes the vast majority of like their planes, and
Um,
they're the main plane manufacturer.
mhm.
But they do have a military arm.
Okay, because I thought like Boeing is the, our American one, and it's in a duopoly with basically Airbus, which is a French aircraft manufacturer. So basically, the good thing about like Boeing, and I've learned about this also from Phil Town, the investor, is that Boeing can be kind of compelling because they have almost monopolistic power, being that they're one of the only two main aircraft manufacturers. So you either have that as a choice or Airbus. There's not really that much in between as far as like on the scale and level that they're at. But the problem with Boeing that I've heard is that they've got so much debt, and that might be a tricky situation. And during the pandemic, I think some of the Boeing stock might have gone down, but maybe some of it's recovered. So I think it's very interesting to think about, like, and if people out there are wondering about potentially good investments, you want to look for companies that have competitive advantages. And when you're only one of two plane manufacturers, that's a pretty good place to be in, even though Boeing has a ton of debt. So you have to weigh, is it worth it that you might want to invest in a company that has so much debt? Because sometimes debt can be a killer too. So that's a good suggestion, though, to look into something like Boeing, because it technically is a very strong company, and its future is pretty secure, especially since they need to keep making planes for both commercial and military purposes. But like, you have to kind of look more into it and see if you can understand that business.
Yeah, another one I would definitely look into would be Northrop Grumman.
Hmm.
They definitely help with the nuclear triad. They have the B-21 bomber.
Hmm.
It's gonna be up in the air who wins the next contracts for the next fighter pilots, but it's probably looking like Northrop Grumman will probably win, given the fact that the B-21 can essentially take down a small nation on its own, which
Wow.
is a pretty scary thought to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I saw it's going to cost like $203 billion over 30 years.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And another thing is too, if you get into the space, you would notice that a lot of these projects do go over budget and they do go over a time horizon. So that is very typical in this space, sadly.
I can imagine, because I mean, with all the testing they need to do and all the, vetting before something gets approved by the government for use, I can imagine, things take time to innovate and to, build on, the progress that was there before. So yeah, it seems like when they go over budget, what kind of happens with some of these military contractors? Does the government have to like, let's say you put in a change order with the government and say, hey, we're actually going to need more budget because we got to this point, but things happen and we need to, we need more money to complete the job. So do you think the government usually kind of green lights more budget, or like, do they have to wait until, say, the next fiscal budget before, more money could be granted, and then, it just takes forever to try to, build something maybe?
I think it's a bit of both. I know that some of the communities can just okay it through their own separate power. Like I know that the defense committee can just okay the defense contracts to have more money. But you have to remember this one too. These are private companies, so they will upfront a lot. They will upfront some of the costs on their own just for making it. And you have to remember this one too. once we modernize military, Northrop Grumman is going to be the fighter pilots, and then essentially they're going to be one of the two powers of the main free world with Lockheed Martin, essentially.
Wow. So those two companies seem like if you want to know what's the biggest and best, those might be also ones to look into is Northrop Grumman and also Lockheed Martin.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very interested in them too in Pacific, of course. Of course, I'm very interested in Raytheon or RTX Corporation. Now it's called. It used to be called Raytheon. And of course, Boeing is a very interesting company. And if you want a big old company that is in the ship making business, and I don't know if they're going to divest the ship making business, etc., would be General Dynamics. They've
Oh,
been around for 100 years, and they're very integral for the military too. Given the
hmm,
fact that they're trying to increase the Navy budget too for those ships and submarines.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. And it looks like we're going to need that because I I've heard also that China has made so many military outposts around the world. Like they start by like also trying to set up a bunch of ports and that's also something that I know the US is competing with. So I can only imagine that, we need to maintain the bases and the ports that we have with different countries and we're going to need ships to go to places because like if America wants to maintain its hegemony, it may not want to, kind of be um, butted out by China, like on their ships. So probably it's in America's interest to try to, you know, fund more Navy endeavors.
Yeah, the one thing that politicians both agree on is the military, which is very weird. But they both you can't get unelected for funding the military, and you can't really get people mad at you for funding the military.
Yeah, and I mean, we haven't gotten so much into cybersecurity. Maybe we'll cover that at another time, but I think that's a huge part of America's national interest in terms of, there's a lot of digital, kind of Cold War type stuff going on. And I think that, aside from, election influence and other hacking stuff, like it's important that America also is at the forefront of some of the cybersecurity protection. So maybe we'll save that for another time. But thanks for telling us about kind of what's going on with military contractors and the defense budget, and it seems like a very exciting kind of place to be. I'm sure there's so much need and a lot of job opportunities if people are into that. Like it's an area that will necessitate growing, and also with all the space endeavors, like I'm sure with people who watch Star Wars or Star Trek, kind of lends itself to imagination of what we could do in space, and that's always like a subject of interest even if you just watch it for entertainment purposes.
Yeah. Also, fun fact too: Raytheon is the only company I've seen with an actual space laser.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, what do you think that's used for?
The space laser.
Yeah.
Probably nothing at the moment. But if you look at it all, I did a committee on this. I know I used to be in MOD-UN, and we debated the militaristic uses of space.
Hmm.
There there is of course the kinetic weapons. That's essentially when you blow up a space satellite and then you use the kinetic force speed through gravity to essentially make it into a bomb
Wow.
through through the gravitational pull slash the impact.
Hmm. Wow. That sounds
Well,
like a pretty interesting technology there.
Well, it's not really technology. It's just them just break. Have you ever seen like a shuttle land like
No.
in the ocean? So essentially,
Oh,
when the shuttle lands, they break through the atmosphere, and then the reason why you see all the red is because the oxygen is blown up so quickly, slash the breaking of the ozone, and then when it lands, you know that giant splash puddle. That's just
right.
all the kinetic force
Okay,
that put
yeah.
on it.
All right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess I wasn't sure what to call it, but it definitely sounds very interesting with, all the advancements and will be critical to America and its infrastructure going forward. And usually we get something, kind of society changing. Like back in the day, the internet was originally a military invention, the same with GPS. So like all of that was pretty critical to the future. So like maybe we'll see some more everyday commercial applications of some of what comes out from military innovation, but not always. Some of it might just be more military focused anyway, because that's their industry. But with things like drones, I'm sure drones probably started out as more military related.
Yes, yeah. The main drone that we used was called the Reaper drone, and it was a pretty expensive drone. I forget who made it, but that was the first use of drones. But from now going on, I don't really see the military using the Reaper drone because it's so expensive. I see them using more cheaper drones so
Uh-huh.
they can do it in mass.
Hmm. Okay. Well, cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's so much food for thought here that people can look into if they'd like. And I greatly appreciate you coming on again, Gabe, and enlightening us about military contractors, because I'm sure a lot of people out there could probably guess that I'm not super familiar with this. So I greatly appreciate Gabe sharing all his insights. So, anything last words you would like to share before we might wrap it up for today?
With these type of companies, you have to think very long term. If I
Hmm.
do end up purchasing one of these companies, it will be for a 10+ year hold because I am just betting on the deglobalization of the globe and the isolationism of America.
Hmm.
Essentially, that is the two ideas that we'll get massive exposure to by buying one of these companies. And of course, you have the space theory too, that would play out in the next 10 years because Space Force is a thing, but it's
Oh
not
yeah.
not thin.
Yeah, I heard about that. Isn't that one of the newer, that's one of the newer divisions, and like I know there's some shows kind of like related to that, right? But like yeah, that's a new exciting field.
Yes, yeah, the Space Force was unironically made by Trump, and then has become one of the mainstays in the military with it actually getting more budget. It's only like 6%, but it is still a sizable investment for the government to actually put up
Yeah,
all these roads into space
cool.
with all the engineering properties, etc.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah. So that'd be also something, if people are into that kind of industry, it sounds like more is going to happen there. So, based on looking into America's foreign policy and military policy, we can kind of see what potential companies could be relevant related to America's ambitions and national security interests. So, for sure, all of that is great. And thank you so much again. It was awesome learning about this from you.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no problem. Another good resource on this would be Dan Weston's channel. He was a logistics officer for the army, so that's where I got a vast majority of my information from. Was really through his live streams on the military contractors. He
Hmm.
goes more in depth, and he was a history major, and he wrote his thesis on the Abrams tanks and the evolution of the tanks. I think.
Okay.
Uh, the Abrams is a tank,
Oh,
like like tank.
uh-huh. Yeah, I mean that helps for some of us who may not have known what that was. And you were telling me before we recorded a little bit about the tank like evolution. And I know we're slightly running out of time, but do you mind telling our audience real quick about tank stuff?
Yeah, definitely. The Abrams tank. It's called the Abrams X. It would have an unmanned turret. It would have anti precision ammo slash stuff like that in it. So essentially, when you get fired at, the tank will automatically fire at it through the automatic reloader.
All right.
And it's a smaller tank and it's a lighter tank
And
too.
that's
So
also part of America's modernization efforts, right?
yes, essentially yes. But it's not the tanks that you see in the textbooks from like
Oh,
World
okay.
War II. It's a very small, very lighter tank.
Okay. Yeah, probably like, to maneuver, not like the old ones from 70 years ago.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, that wraps it up for today. Thanks so much, Gabe. And we'll include links to some of this stuff if you're interested in watching more to learn more about, this area. And thank you so much again. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.